so we are recording now. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. It's funny, I've done a number of these virtually, like kind of all over the country. And it's, I think this will become the thing now because, for the longest time, we kind of said, I would go to a place, I would kind of see the facility. I would spend, I don't know, sometimes 5 to 6 hours in different sessions, like training and then talking about specific kids. And I think we're going to get to the point, which is great, where people can actually access everything via the computer and get training that they need versus this idea that you have to go to a place and do it. And
Right.
so I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of unique behavioral features, especially if you haven't seen anybody with PWS, and
Mhm.
then focus specifically on some of the physical and behavioral features that you guys will probably encounter.
Okay.
So I've been studying people with PWS since 1995, so it's like 26, 27 years. And so I have evaluated more than 325. I consult with a number of really large PWS facilities, so some that have more than 100 residents who all have the same thing. They're kind of rare and far and few between. There are 3 in the United States. There are a couple in Canada, and then there are 4 or 5 in Australia that I consult with, just kind of training, ongoing best practices. We continue to study PWS. And so it's kind of this idea as things change, we want people to have up-to-date information because there are things that I said probably 10 years ago that just aren't true anymore. I think it's really important to know that the phenotype of PWS, not all kids are the same. If you know one person with PWS, you know one person with PWS. This idea, kind of like with autism, it seems to be a spectrum. Some kids have more behavior issues, some kids have more food issues. Some kids have kind of a variety of other issues that seem kind of rare, but they're often part of PWS. And so again, I think it's important to kind of figure out where Brody lies on that. And I feel like I have a pretty good take on that just because I've known him for so long. And to kind of know that environment and staff dynamics can really kind of influence. So if they're in a good fit, people are getting it, they're doing what they're supposed to, you'll find a lot fewer behavior problems. If you continue to have behavior problems and other issues, to me, you should really look at staffing and kind of programming and what do we need to do differently to actually serve this person.
Okay.
So the genetics here for somebody like Brody, he has a small deletion. It's somewhere between 500 and 1,000 genes, depending on the size of it. Gene therapy, people always ask, does it work? It's too many genes to actually replace them. And the genes actually affect appetite, the feeling of full, and behavior and cognition. Also temperature regulation. So they seem to really run very cold or very hot. And so again, just as far as, I tell people, just be aware that they don't regulate their temperature very well. And so you just need to be on top of that. So these genes actually kind of change how the hypothalamus work. It's really deep inside the brain. I kind of call it like the very deepest part of the brain. And so that's temperature, eating behavior, sleep, sex hormones, and then just general growth. And so it can change a number of things like neurochemicals, neuropeptides, things like serotonin, which influences mood, ghrelin influences appetite, and oxytocin influences appetite, plus some things that like trust and behavior issues and things like that. And so we already know that a fair number of people have really poor emotional regulation. They're prone to rages, outbursts, and mood swings. It's not bipolar. People want to diagnose it, but it is definitely part of PWS. And it's probably about between 50 and 70% of people have pretty significant emotional regulation issues. And they're things that you can see coming, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to miss them. And so I tell people the best thing you can do is to kind of be aware when people are ramping up and know how to kind of diffuse that versus having an all-out battle, which people sometimes let it always go to crisis versus managing it before it goes there.
Right.
We know that energy burning is impaired because of low muscle tone and increased body fat. They burn between half and a third of the calories that normal people of the same size do. So I have people eating between 600 and 800 calories a day, which seems like nothing, and it is. And so, but that's what they need to actually keep, kind of their body burning calories. Any more than that, they will gain weight. And so people often say, well, so-and-so is gaining weight, but they're only eating like 800 calories. I'm like, no, they're not. They're getting food from somewhere. They have a very hard time losing weight. So just be aware that, as people start to go up, people are always like, they're just a little chunky. It's not good for them because they can't lose weight the way you do because they have really low muscle tone.
Right.
Some of the other physical symptoms, they have a very high threshold for pain. I've had hit kids who've been restrained or whatever else, and they have like dislocated shoulders, broken arms. They don't seem to besides maybe favoring it or doing something else, you don't always know. And so just be aware that they definitely, if something happens, you're not going to know it from their pain response. They have a really high threshold. They also don't have the reflex to throw up. If they throw up, take them to the hospital because there's something really wrong there. Even if they eat a lot of food or they eat raw or disgusting food, they won't throw it up often. So poor swallowing, we found that they actually have food residue in their esophagus kind of all the time. They don't seem to be able to get it all down. Their bowels empty very slowly. So constipation and GI issues are really common in this population. We used to never talk about that, but now it's a really common thing. And it's something that staff needs to be aware of, just even like finding out is somebody having a regular bowel movement, because you're not always going to know. Mm-hmm. So why do we talk so much about food? People with PWS lack the signal to feel full. And so they have an increased drive for food and interest in food. And so this can really lead the person to kind of eat themselves to death. And I'm not trying to scare you. I've seen it happen. So I want you to be aware that they can do that. The thinner they are, the higher at risk for stomach rupture. So some of our thin kids have been in settings where within 5 to 10 minutes, they have enough access to food that they'll eat enough that they'll rupture their stomach. And so again, we have to be aware that, if they get access to food, they're going to eat as much as they can. It's like somebody who's starving. That's how they feel. They feel starving. So whenever they get access to food, they're going to eat as much as they can, as high calories they can. Like literally, I've had kids choke because they are just stuffing it in their face as quickly as they can before somebody catches them. Some of the mantras that they talk about are this kind of idea of no hope, no doubt, and no disappointment. So this idea that to really manage the food, we have to have advanced planning of meals. We have to schedule all the day's events with meals and snacks clearly identified, remind people of these plans, and have a behavior program, which kind of requires you do one thing before this thing happens, including meals. It doesn't mean we don't feed people. It means that if we need them to do something unpleasant, we maybe put it before a meal, because I will tell you, eating a meal is a very reinforcing thing for them. And that's the way we kind of contribute to like a successful behavior management. We don't withhold food. We put it on a schedule. They know when they're going to eat, what they're going to eat, how much they're going to eat. And this idea of negotiation, we don't go there. It's all planned. It's all set. And you just have this real kind of like, low affect, like, yeah, here's what we've planned. And so my thought is for people with PWS, the minute they see an opening or an ambivalence from staff, they're going to exploit that to actually be able to get more food, convince staff to do that. I've had staff where they've fed somebody because they don't want them to have an outburst or whatever else. So just be aware, you start that, it is not going to end. It is only going to get out of control.
Yeah. Okay.
Hyperphagia is not always related to weight. So you can't look at somebody who's overweight and say they have more hyperphagia than somebody who's thin. They can be thin, they can have normal weight, and they can still have significant food issues. It's definitely, I tell people all the time, you can't unlearn it. It's like sleep. It is a part of the brain that basically people with PWS are programmed to feel hungry all the time, to never really feel full. And so we're not going to fix it. We're not going to reason with it. It just is something that it is. So the only thing we can do is realize that we can't do willpower. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter even what you say. They can say stuff to me like, well, Elizabeth, I won't ever do that again. Do I believe them? Absolutely not. Because again, their brain is what's controlling it. It's nothing wrong with their personality or their moral fiber. It really is the brain. So they're always going to feel hungry. They're never going to feel full. They don't have any level of disgust or distaste. So I've had people eat stuff out of the trash, bug crawling on it. If that's what they have options with, that's what they're going to take. And environmental controls are the only way to manage it. This young man is interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about him because I think it's important to see. He's obviously really tall. He's thin. And what happened is he was in a vocational program, 5 hours a day, did small jobs, food was supervised. At a holiday party, he was left unsupervised. They figured for about 5 to 7 minutes. All staff was dealing with another young man. No one saw him take or eat any food. But that night he complained of a stomach ache, which is very unusual for people with PWS. That high threshold for pain means they don't complain of almost anything. They sometimes will just to get attention, but not this kind of stuff. So if people complain of a stomach ache or not feeling good, again, it means something is they've eaten either a lot of food or they've eaten bad food. So finally, he kept saying he didn't eat any extra food, whatever else. They couldn't find anything missing. But the next day he was admitted to the hospital. And so CT showed some distension. They didn't really do anything else. That he just kept insisting he didn't take any food. He died of a ruptured bowel. He had 16 pounds of sepsis. And so it took almost no time for that to go from an obstruction to septic and basically dying. And again, he weighed like 190 pounds. He was 6'4". And so he was one of those kids that was very fit, very in great shape. So we just know that they have a higher threshold for pain and they're more likely to take food. And even till his dying breath, he never admitted he took any food. So the staff could only assume that something happened, that he got food. So most cases of death are related to complications. Sometimes it's just the kind of common things, type 2 diabetes, respiratory cardiac problems. Sometimes it's just pure food seeking. So the idea that they will do risky things to get food can put them in harm's way. Choking, aspirating on food, food poisoning, stealing, all those things can get them in trouble. So just kind of be aware that we're not going to stop it. We only manage it.
Mm-hmm.
In supported living, they need to be supervised, monitored. You need to make sure that food and money is not accessible to them. They're very fast, they're very clever, and they can fool you. So no matter what they tell me, I just generally don't believe them. I don't say that, but I just don't.
Right.
They need to be weighed, sometimes daily, for accountability reasons, and they can gain incredibly dangerous amounts of weight very quickly. I actually had a kid that had, well, I think on a weekend visit, gained 26 pounds in 3 days. It doesn't
Right.
even seem possible, but it is. So
Right.
extra weight always means extra food. I had a young man who was in a hospital and the group home staff called me. He was actually having, I don't know, a procedure of some sort. And so they're telling me about this incredible weight gain. But he's in a hospital and they know he's being fed and blah, blah, blah. And I just said, he's getting extra food somehow. I don't know how, but I'm just telling you. And then they said, well, we didn't tell you this, but he actually is non-ambulatory. He's so heavy right now, he can't actually get out of bed. And I said, he is still getting food from somebody. So the next time he had an x-ray or therapy or something, I said, toss his room and you'll find wrappers. And sure enough, they found more than 100 wrappers stuffed in between the mattress of his hospital bed. And group home staff was actually bringing him food. They actually rigged up a camera to figure out who it was because he wouldn't narc on that person, and found out that staff was bringing it to him. As soon as they stopped it, his weight started going down. So
Wow.
it's not fluid retention. It's not any other reason. It's always food access. So I tell people weighing them daily is a great accountability factor. So staff can make it easier for them by following healthy eating plans, eat with them and not in front of them. There's another group home in Alabama that I went to. I did some training in the one in Huntsville. I think it was Ability Plus, and I saw the staff with all their giant coffee drinks and McDonald's bags and whatever else. And I just kind of said, if you bring this crap into the group home, just know the kid with PWS is going, wait a minute, you're eating all this other stuff and I'm getting a salad or broccoli. So again, coffee and other drinks are very tempting. You need to lock trash and recycling cans. And again, don't feel sorry for them. They have what they have, but it's important to know what they're feeling. And so think about their needs and not their wants. They're always going to want more food, but that's not what they need. This quest for independence is really important. And we've kind of moved into this kind of arena with residential settings that we really focus a lot on personal rights and personal responsibilities. But the reality is this isn't a choice that they're making. It really is a biological drive. So it's this idea of balancing the rights they have with the responsibility to keep them healthy. So what can they get versus what should they do? This idea of, we just have to always be aware. And how do you know it's working? We know it's working when their weight is well maintained, they're not having a ton of behavioral issues, and they seem happy and engaged. And if they're one of those things that's not working, you need to figure out how do we put something in place to make that happen. So there are some subtype differences. Brody actually has a deletion. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about like what that looks like, because people don't focus so much on the fact that there are two, or actually there are three subtypes, but the two main ones are these two. So people with deletion have more skin picking. They actually are pretty good at puzzles. They're good with directions and memory. Behavior does seem to mellow as they age. And when people ask about that, it's like late 20s, early 30s. So it's not now, but in the future, he should get more mellow and whatever else. And food issues are generally more of a problem than behavior issues. If you have UPD, the behavior issues, the psychiatric issues are much higher in the people with UPD, and also psychosis. And so we just have to be aware that when things are not working, we've had kids with UPD who become psychotic because they just can't manage the stress. The behavioral features, again, are food interest and hyperphagia, anxiety, stubbornness, need for control, perseveration, getting stuck on the topic, just kind of asking over and over the same thing. They can be very oppositional, they can be very argumentative, and they can also really insist that things be the same every day. So if you've ever watched the Bill Murray, movie Groundhog's Day, they basically would like every day to be like Groundhog's Day. They wake up, same song on the radio, same staff, same breakfast, whatever. They really enjoy things to be consistent and routine for them. And this idea of downtime and free choice and just figuring out what you want to do, they don't deal with that. They're really bad at things like that. They really need people to kind of tell them what to do so that they can manage all of the expectations. So how do they fit together? They have a lot of different amounts of these features. And again, idea of kind of anxiety, stubbornness, all these things are part of the picture. And so it's at any given time, you're going to have to kind of figure out what is the biggest thing that we need to deal with, because it's really hard to deal with everything at once. I will say if there's food security and the person is engaged and has something to do, you'll have a lot fewer behavior problems and hunger problems because they're busy. The minute they kind of have downtime, they're going to start focusing on being hungry. So the anxiety looks a lot like worry, constant need for reassurance, questions about schedules and what's going to happen next, who's going to do this. You'll often start to see them rocking or moving or looking agitated, rubbing, sometimes their hands, sometimes other things. If you see some of those things, be aware that they're anxious and sometimes they're going to blow. So we need to make sure that we deal with it mostly by keeping them busy. So when anxiety continues, it can lead to tearfulness, uncooperative behavior, aggressive behaviors, and also shutting down. So again, at some point, it leads to this big blow up. And usually when that happens, they'll say outrageous things, they'll do outrageous things. And then when it's over, they'll go take a nap, they'll wake up and they'll be like, I don't know why you guys are all upset about it. Like they're done, you're not. So I think it's really important for you to know that we want to keep the anxiety from bubbling over, because that's when they tend to be aggressive. So visual schedules to kind of mentally prepare for events. What does the day look like? Compartmentalizing it. So we'll talk about this for 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever else. Rituals, anything that you can get them to do that's physical, that kind of gets their anxiety to kind of move out in a more physical way is going to be helpful. I always kind of say it's going to be okay. I got this, that kind of stuff, so that they understand that there's no reason for them to worry. There's no reason for them to really get stuck on anything because staff's got this. And then again, limiting questions to 3. So don't keep answering them. They know the answer. They may not like that answer, but you don't want to keep answering it because it will really take a lot of time and staff will get really worn down from having to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So the visual schedule is really helpful. Even for older folks, it kind of helps them move forward, knows what the steps are in order. It's a concrete reminder, sense of accomplishment. We put stickers on those things, know when it's done. And when they ask questions, have them refer back to their schedule. It seems very elementary and people always go, well, they're an adult. They do really well when they know what's going to come next. It doesn't matter what time that is. It's the order at which it kind of comes. So just know that it's really helpful for staff to kind of help him devise a schedule, and they have to follow the schedule. The minute they start doing things, winging it and figuring it out while it happens, you're going to start to have behavior issues. Compartmentalizing, it's a really good thing to do. Don't give them too much information too soon. Give time limits to a topic. They'll just keep going on and on about when are we going to that place and what are we doing? Don't go there. You'll have to limit it because they can't. If they want to keep complaining about staff, I give them a suggestion box. You can write a thing down. You can put it in the suggestion box. You can decide what to do with that, but it sometimes helps them not get stuck on a thing because they've written it down. They've complained about said thing, and let's move on. Sometimes taking 3 deep breaths, counting to 10, just kind of understanding that they don't like change, but you can do baby steps to get to change versus this idea of big change, because again, they're going to really stress when things feel out of control. And the things that they see as being big changes are not things that staff is going to see as big changes, because they'll be like, well, this is just what happened. Right. So we have to anticipate what's going to happen for them and how stressful it's going to make them. So questions are pretty common. It's a way for them to process what's going to happen, how things are going to, if they talk a lot about a thing or an event, you know that it's stressful for them. It can be exciting, but it can also be stressful. You can ask them the question, well, what's the answer to that, Brody? What have we said? Well, you said blah, blah, blah. Right. So you already know that. Great. You don't need to ask me again. And then that idea of kind of asked and answered, have them write down the response, or, basically limit the response. So again, you don't want them to keep asking staff the same question about what's going to happen, because again, it's usually because they want something to change or they're hoping to wear you down to get something. If it leads to tears, it's okay. I tell people, sometimes people with PWS will cry. It seems kind of ridiculous, but I don't care. That to me is a much better way than tears are much better than aggression. And it seems like for most people, that's one of the 2 options. They're either going to cry be sad about something or pout, or they're going to be aggressive and attack staff or other clients. So you just have to be aware that crying is a way better, thing for them to deal with than being aggressive. Give them a safe place to vent, talk. You can validate their feelings without validating behavior. So being upset about staff or something that's happened is totally fine. It's not okay to attack staff or to, grab them or whatever else. So this idea is we want to kind of say, yeah, I know you're upset. It's not okay to act out on those things. And again, give them some time to get over it. This idea, we process it and talk about it. I think it's just better to say, I can see you're upset. Let me know when you're, feeling better and we can get back to it. And that's all I say. And 9 times out of 10, it's much quicker resolution than if I keep talking to them and reasoning with them or trying to get them to see my way. So just kind of know that really what you need to do is give them time, because they need to be able to kind of come around at that point. If they do get aggression, it's often when anxiety is unresolved. It can lead to aggression. We actually found that our biggest correlation of who is aggressive is who is very anxious and worried about things. And again, it doesn't always look like what we see in the typical population. They're not worrying and just kind of nervous. They tend to be stuck, questioning, again, agitated. So if you're starting to see like some physical, agitation, that usually means they're anxious. It can often lead to yelling, throwing things. That's like a swing at somebody. Just if you get close, don't get close. Give them a space to vent. Again, validate emotions and not behavior. And again, no need to rehash or teach a lesson. Just let it go. Because for a lot of times, the best thing you can do is deal with it quickly, proactively, so that they can actually get it together. If they do get to the point where they're shutting down, they're not going to respond. They'll collapse on the floor. They'll sometimes cry. They'll pretend they're asleep. So again, just if they're in public, make sure they're safe and monitor them. You're not going to be able to, I've seen Brody, you're not going to be able to physically move him. You're not going to be able to get him to whatever, but you just need to make sure he's safe. So I think a lot of it is if you're going out in the community, it's having some expectations about that, and then what's going to happen if things fall apart, and assume that sometimes they're going to fall apart. So you better follow through, and staff needs to be aware that they need to have a plan. Being proactive, not reactive, really works. So have a plan, prepare for the unexpected, also have a backup plan. Really think about staffing when it comes to that, because again, he's a big boy. It's like, when he was in several of our studies, I could see him start to ramp up. I have worked at a psych hospital. I've worked at a prison. I have a lot of experience dealing with people who are combative or physical or violent. But here's the deal. I can't intervene with somebody who is twice my size. So be clear about expectations, have them repeat them to you, follow the plan, and follow through. Don't be argued by, rattled by argument or negotiation. It's not time to negotiate. We've already talked about it. And I would just be really clear that we're not doing this. And that's sometimes what I say, we're not doing this. Oppositional behavior, they often have to say no before they say yes. Just know that it's not about you, so don't personalize it. I often give them 2 choices so they don't get stuck. So you can do this or this. I try not to back them into this corner where there's ultimatums or threats, because let me tell you, they can out-stubborn you any day of the week. So I don't go down that road. I try to find ways to say yes. If they say stuff like, well, I'm ready for lunch and it's 9:30, I'm like, yeah, me too. We'll eat at about 11:30, same as always. And then let it go. So you just basically acknowledge, yeah. And then you basically say, yeah, me too. Or yeah, I know. Acknowledge it. And I try really hard not to say the word no. And it's amazing. You can really reframe a lot of things when they'll say, well, I don't like this. And I'm like, yeah, we just have to get through this. It's not really a big deal. Let's just get through it so we can do this other fun things. You're constantly just really focusing on the next thing, moving on. And don't ask a question if you don't want to know for an answer. Don't ask them if they want to put on their shoes or get dressed or shower. You basically say, man, look, schedule says time to shower. Let's do that thing. Cooperative statements. We're going to do this. This is what's going to happen next. Work way better than anything that feels authoritarian or I'm making you do this. And if you have staff that has that kind of bent to be authoritarian and kind of bossy, just know they're not going to work very well with people with PWS. They is definitely a certain kind of way that they need to kind of be dealt with. And a lot of it is just not getting stuck on something, because they will get stuck. So they're perseverating. We'll talk about something as long as you'll let them. So giving them time limits, topic limits. We do a lightning round. You can ask me one more question, then we got to move on. Just don't let them get stuck. Be a salesman. My dad always wanted me to be a salesman. And I say, I sell stuff all the time. I sell people things that they don't want to do all day long, and try to get them to move on. So think about your audience, think about your affect, your tone of voice, think about your pitch. What's in it for them? What do you want? How can everybody have some of what they want? And don't keep talking. If you see them start to shut down or getting agitated or upset, just shut up, because a lot of times you can head things off if you don't keep talking. So programming is really important. You have to have trust. They have to understand that the staff understands them. Know that they're going to be skeptical and definitely not trusting until, and they're going to test people until they pass. I often talk about testing new staff, and so they will do that. Who is the strong one? Who is the person who is not bluster but really will follow through? That's the people they're looking for. I always say I'm an iron fist and a velvet glove. I look real soft on the outside, but at the end of the day, we're still going to do this thing. So you have to do what you say you're going to do. Make the day filled with purpose, activity. Being idle will lead to behavior issues. I deal a lot with behavior issues in residential settings when people have downtime, time to decide what they want to do, free play, free activity. Start with lots of structure and supervision. You can always loosen it, but it's really hard to go from a loose environment to a tight environment because they're not going to like that. So again, really be thinking about what their day looks like and keep them busy. Downtime is don't time. You're going to manage so many more issues if they're not busy. So they need to be engaged, busy. You're going to need to help them come up with schedules and structures. Otherwise, they're going to sleep all day and they're up all night and they're going to have more behavior issues. So again, structure really is the key to the day. Don't think about what staff needs or what staff wants, but think about what the person with PWS needs, because they really do need structure in their day. Exercise and weight control activity is really important for them to weight control. It's not going to change their entire body, but we know that burning calories is good for them. It's good for kind of general health. It needs to be an everyday event. It doesn't matter how you do it. It can be dance contest. It can be, I do a couple of Zoom things even now where I work with a couple of group homes where they actually have a dance marathon and we do it by Zoom, but you can do that in person. You don't say, hey, do you want to dance now or do you want to exercise now? You just go, hey, man, it's time to do the treadmill or the exercise bike, or we're going to go walk the field. It always feels like it is just built into their day, and you just look at the schedule and go, look at that. We're going to go out to the field and do 5 laps or whatever else. And so it can be fun. It can be creative. It also helps move food through their digestive system. You can also really help with anxious anxiety or aggression. It is hard to be really angry and aggressive when you're tired. So wear them out, just like a small toddler. Nutrition, we know that generally they need a high protein, a high good fat diet, and good fat is not, funnel cakes or corn dogs. It's, nuts or whatever else. It can really help with hunger or weight. You really do have to count calories. People always go, well, that's about 300 calories. You're going to have to use measuring cups. You're going to have to weigh things because, again, they're going to need enough calories to lose weight and maintain weight. And so I know Brody before has, his weight has really escalated. And so I think it's really important for staff to know, we're not worried about him being thin. That doesn't matter. He needs to be healthy. And so whatever that, goal weight is, staff is going to have to help him with looking at those specific nutritional things. Nutrition wise, we also need to know that sugar should be limited. I mean, fruit is fine. Other things, artificial sweeteners are really not recommended. We actually have seen that they actually kind of light up the brain and lead to more hunger. So using kind of like a modified Mediterranean diet, a modified keto diet works really, really well for them. If you have to use some kind of sweetener, monk fruit or stevia are better options than anything with like sucralose or aspartame or whatever else. So again, little sugar if you have to. Real sugar is better than, artificial sweeteners. And if you do any of those things, try to like really limit it. We found that if we can actually get them to eat a high protein, kind of low carb diet, they're less hungry, they have less behavior problems. And so the reality is then they burn more calories. So, again, whole fresh food, frozen is way better than processed food. So I know it's a hassle for staff to think about that, but nutrition really is important here because if you're eating 900 or 1,000 calories, you got to make it count. And I kind of think the idea of kind of big volumes of food is way better than just like 3 little things on a tiny little plate. And that's, 400 calories done for the day. I had a young lady that lived in a group home in Kentucky who said that, she went to bed at 7 o'clock. And I was like, really? She goes, well, I eat dinner at 6. And by the time that I've eaten all my calories for the day, I might as well go to sleep because there's nothing to look forward to. And she was 50 years old. So the reality is think about how you can kind of fill them up with high protein foods, fresh foods, foods that really kind of fill them up versus this idea of lots of junk foods, because it will not fill them up and they'll be more hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Fast food is the worst thing that people with PWS can eat. That's true of regular people too. You can use a smaller plate so it looks like more food, 2/3 veggies, 1/3 meat, and again, very small amounts of starch, very small amounts of condiments. So don't think of yourself as condiment being like kind of a calorie-free food, because it's not. It has lots of sugar, it has lots of other things in it. So you really will have to measure out kind of everything when it comes to the food part. Staff-wise, we know that there are some personal characteristics that fit really well with people with PWS. So if you're an easygoing and patient person, flexible, creative, emotionally secure. So we don't want people who are insecure and constantly have to kind of show their authority. That's not going to work well. But if you're a problem solver, you're calm and confident, and you can really consistently reward behavior, you will find that they trust you, you can manage them, and they will actually do what you need them to do. Your job is to find a way to say yes. So no matter what some ridiculous customer on a flight wants, you basically act like, sure, that's something completely reasonable. And you don't have to think that, but you have to act like that. You have to basically go, yeah, they are. This idea that yes is a bad thing, it's not. If you say maybe, or we'll talk about it, we'll think about it, let me tell you, you're opening the door for insecurity, and they're going to take advantage of it. It's better to say yes than have a 3-hour meltdown and say yes at the end of that, because then they think to themselves, okay, so this is what I have to do to get what I want. So I'm really big. If I know that at the end of the day that yes is really not that big a deal, or it's better to say yes than to say maybe, or we'll talk about it, or think about it. You're only as strong as your weakest link. If you have a person or a time of the day or a situation that always seems to be a problem, evaluate what that person is, what that problem is, and either replace that person, fix the problem. Because here's the deal: people with PWS, like people who play, red road, they're going to go through the weakest link every time. If you have an issue during the day at a certain time with a certain person, look about what it is about that person, that situation, that is really causing the problem. Because PWS kids can figure out quickly who is the person that is going to break. And sometimes they're the ones who have the biggest kind of roar, but they don't have very big bites. So at the end of the day, I tell people, I often don't roar, but I will bite you if you try to come through me. So it's important for them to know staff's got this, and they're not going to let kids with PWS fail. It really works well to let them calm down, let them decide when they're ready to return to the situation. They're rehashing. I don't need them to say, I'm sorry. Usually what it sounds like is this: sorry. Yeah, that feels really sincere to me. So I don't care if they say they're sorry. I just want to move on. So this idea that you have to be right, it means they have to be wrong. So I think it's really important for staff to kind of realize we're not going to fix them. We only manage them. If staff is yelling at them, arguing with them, being sarcastic, making fun of them to kind of get them to see their side, definitely not going to work. Trying to get them to give in, not going to work. Trying to get them to reason with them. They're not logical when they're upset. They're ridiculous. Some of the stuff I've heard come out of their mouth when they're upset is the most stupid thing you've ever heard. But they're not logical. So why would you even reason with them? I always tell people when I work in a psych hospital, I don't reason with crazy people because they're crazy. So all I do is try to manage it and try to fix that. I don't have to have the last word, and I definitely don't hold a grudge. If we have an issue, I try to figure out what caused the issue, what was the trigger, what did we do to inadvertently reinforce it, where did we screw up? Because we're not going to fix them, we're only going to change us. This idea of hard now and easy later, or easy now and hard later. So if we don't have rules and we don't have structure and we don't have things that we really want to, kind of have happen, you're going to find that they're going to test. You can't give in to them. They are, like I said, the most stubborn people. I always see the, little moniker for the show Survivor: outwit, outlast. People with PWS will outwit and outlast you every single day. So just be aware. They're really good at that. That's kind of how they're made. You got to believe in yourself. If you think you can, more often than not, you're going to be able to achieve it. Be confident in your skills, practice them daily, find ways to continue to learn and adapt. So what works, what doesn't work. When we used to have new students, they would screw up royally, and they would come in at the end of the day and they would often say, well, that person with PWS was so unreasonable. They were so aggressive. And I'd be like, right, that's who they are. The only thing we changed is us. What are we going to do differently next time? What are we going to do so we don't have this issue? And like I tell people, we have to adapt because they don't. Negotiating will lead to arguing and bargaining. Be very clear about the expectations. I even put them in writing. If it's something that's going to be like an ongoing issue, put them in writing, make a contract, everybody sign off. do these before the situation happens. You can't really do them on the fly. That does not work with people with PWS. Again, use a calm and bright affect. I'm always smiling. I'm always happy. Don't get me wrong. They irritate the crap out of me at times, but I don't let them know that. And if an argument starts, I just go, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to argue about this. And I literally, if I don't walk away, at least don't engage eye contact. Because again, how can they control their emotions if we cannot control ours? They really read into people, and angry, reactive people are their absolute chum. They will go after that person. I've had staff that just don't seem to get that they're part of the issue because they continue to argue with them or try to reason with them, or they get kind of snarky and sarcastic. Again, that is not going to work. So what you have to really do is think about what works for them, what are you going to do, and how can you do it consistently? I always say we learn more from them than they do from us. They have made me more patient, more kind, more considerate, and also more tough than I would have ever been had I not worked with them. So for staff, they have to kind of know we're not going to change them or fix them, but that we can learn a lot from them. And it really does make a difference when it comes to staffing to really think about how can we work with who they are, what they are, and the deficits they have versus this idea that we're going to actually ever change them. When people, ABA therapists or staff tell me, well, we're going to fix this problem. Really? Because I don't think you are. I've been doing this for 26 years. And if we could fix them, I would be, a millionaire and I wouldn't be doing training. I would just be done. Again, our families are the ones that kind of help us know all these things. And I love the fact that like for, Heidi and Brody, they've been in multiple studies trying to figure out how people with PWS work, what medications might work, those kinds of things. So I think it's really important for us to kind of think about the fact that they're the ones that teach us and not the other way around. So I'm going to stop share and stop recording.